Okay, let's have a look at setting up your BimlFlex project. The first thing you need to do is create a new customer connection. So when you start the BimlFlex app, you'll get this screen over here. The first time, you can change the database server name where you've installed the BimlFlex database. You can use SQL authentication or Windows authentication, and then you'll select the BimlFlex database. I've got a couple there, but basically I'm going to do this one here. So what we want to do now is create a new customer because this is the first time we do this. And for the purposes of this project here, I'm just going to call my customer BimlFlex trial project, but you can give it any name you want. And we just hit the create customer. So by default, what I'll now do is create you the first version. We'll cover all versions in a later section there. Hit apply, and now you've created your first customer there. So before we start going, we need to get some sample metadata in there. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll grab some load sample metadata here and choose the starting point for SQL Server here and the replace version metadata snapshot and click OK. So what we've now done is we've loaded the sample metadata to start our walkthrough with. We'll have some connections here, which I'll go through in a little bit here, batches and projects. So that is just creating our very first sample metadata project. And now let's have a look at how we set up the BimlStudio project and connect that to this BimlFlex metadata. When you open BimlStudio, you will need to create your BimlFlex project here. This is the BimlStudio is what we'll use to actually build out all the code. So again, pick your location here. I'm just going to leave it where it is, and I'm going to use the same name for my BimlFlex project, and I'm going to click OK. This creates an empty BimlStudio project that will be able to build all of our metadata, and now we'll connect it to our metadata to the database. The first thing we'll do here is we'll say what database server are we connected to. I'm using Windows authentication there. I'll hit update here on the databases, and I'll choose BimlFlex. If you only have one project, this will be, or one customer version, this will be auto-filled for you. If you're working through it and you have multiple projects, you'll hit the update button there. So I'll save the metadata here. You may need to close BimlFlex and open that again, and that's what I'll do now. I'll just close BimlFlex and open it again, BimlStudio, and I'll open it again. Okay, so I'm just going to select the same project that I had before, and this is now going to open and be connected to my metadata. And as you can see here, here's my sample connections, databases, and schemas. So now I'm ready to actually import some metadata and start building out some solutions. All right, let's have a look at loading sample metadata in BimlFlex. So on the dashboard here, and you can always get to the dashboard by clicking this BimlFlex icon here, we have an actions area here with load sample, metadata, and load defaults. So the first sample metadata we loaded was the starting point of MS SQL for Microsoft SQL Server. We also have the after import before data vault modeling. This is great if you want to get back to a consistent place after the import, but before we've done any modeling. We can choose this one here. So for now, we're going to stick with the starting point here. I'm just going to again obviously replace that just so we're at the same point. We also have load defaults, and what this is depending on which kind of project you're running, you can either be putting in place a insert-only architecture for SQL Server and Azure SQL data warehouse and managed instances and that kind of stuff, or you can have a Snowflake insert-only architecture. So you can run these at any point. These defaults here will only set up your default settings, which is your configuration settings and data type mappings. It'll just go and re-update those. So if you're doing a different kind of project, you can always load the defaults here. So that's how we load the sample metadata. All right, now after we've loaded the sample metadata, it's time to start importing some metadata. So the first thing you want to do is go to your connections tab here, and where we have the AWL_SRC, which stands for AdventureWorksLT source, this is being configured to point to my local host here and to the AdventureWorksLT database. Now you should have followed the instruction at this stage to actually have that database installed. However, you may have put that on a different server, so you'll replace the connection string here, the logical host, and you may, if you've got SQL authentication, you'll need to amend your connection string to point there. But for now, let's leave everything else in place. The other connections that we have at the moment here is the staging connection, which again is going to take the data from the source and put it into our staging database. Again, change the connection string if you need to. And then we have the ODS. So we are going to do a persistent staging on our ODS layer here. Again, change the connection string should you have to. Leave everything else as it is, and then we have a raw data vault or data vault connection here. We've set this to a connection type of OLAP-DB, so we're going to use ELT-based stored procedure-driven data vault. Again, change the data connection string, leave the rest as it is. And then lastly, we have the data Mart connection here, and again, we're going to use that later on. If you're not doing a data vault, obviously we'll have the walkthrough of going straight from staging into the data Mart layer. Again, change the connection string should you need to. The other things that we have is the batches. So BimlFlex works on the concept of you have a project, and within that project you can have one or many batches, and within those batches they will execute one or many packages or workloads. This is a standard pattern whether you're using SSIS or as a data factory. They'll get set up this way. So the metadata for the default is set up in a kind of one-to-one way. So one project, one batch, a whole bunch of tables, both for the source data vault and the data mart. In other examples, we go into more detail on that. So the source system here, we've configured that as the batch. We said that we want to execute 2 threads which is basically 2 packages at a time, and the rest of that leave it as it is. We've got a data vault project here that goes from a batch here that again 2 threads, but again leave it as it is. A lot of these settings are covered in other documentation here. The last thing is the project. Now the project is effectively the glue, the thing that brings it all together. Here we have the extract of the source. So what we've set this up to do here is to go from a source, land the data into staging, persist the data in an ODS database or persistent staging database, and then we're going to go into data vault. When we record the sessions on the data mart, we will show you how to reconfigure this to exclude the data vault and go straight into the data mart. The data vault project is very simple. We're going to go from staging into the data vault, and the data mart is simple. Again, we're going to go from the data vault into our data mart staging layer here, and then merge the data back into these 2 databases. Can be different, but for the walkthrough we leave them as the same. And again, when we do the data mart, we will if we only do data mart without data vault, we will reconfigure this later on. So now that we have this configured, we want to go to our source project, or you can also get to it from your source connection here. We want to import the metadata. So I'm going to click the import metadata button. We're going to leave all of these settings here as it is. Again, those are covered in specific videos about the importing metadata in other sections of our documentation. But for now, I'm just going to select all of my tables here. Now, in my database, I've removed the views, but if you have the views, unselect them here or unselect the import views. But effectively, we want all of these tables imported. We click the import metadata button. And then if you go to the connections, you can see here that you have all of your tables imported. You can go and look into them. They'll have business keys or integration keys all set up here. And that's really it at the moment. So that's all about importing metadata. This also, what I've just done here, is the starting point for this sample metadata here. So I will keep coming back to this import after metadata. So all of those steps that we've done gets us to that sample metadata here. After we've imported, we're going to do a couple of small metadata changes. We will go into data type mappings. That's a specialist subject. We'll go into that in separate training sessions. But for now, what we need to do is just go to our product model here. And as you can see here, we've got catalog description, which is an XML column. And by default, SSIS don't move XML columns around that well. So we're going to go in here and just use what we call a data type mapping. So data type mappings is where we can take a source data type and map it to a target data type. So I'm just going to map this to a string max, which that will mean is that the data vault objects will actually be created as a envarchar max instead of an XML, which is more handleable. There is a whole section here about data type mappings that is covered in a separate section. Okay, let's have a look at how we would start doing some data vault modeling here. So if you haven't been following along and it's the first video you watch, let's just go ahead and click the load sample data metadata and do the after import snapshot here. Even if you followed along, let's do this again so we're all baselined and on the same set here. So before we start with the data vault modeling, we want to just I just want to take you through a couple of the settings that we need to make sure is set. They are set, but let's just go through them just so you're aware of it. So it's the hashing setting here. The first one is the hash algorithm. We support a number of them, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, and 512, but we're going to leave this as SHA-1 for now. Then the next thing we're going to check is just hash binary. We allow you the ability to do a binary hash or a text hash, but we're going to leave this at binary. And then we have the SQL compatible row hash and compatible hashing. What this is used for in our earlier versions of BimlFlex, our SSIS components created a hash that was not the same as the hash bytes function or the SHA-1 functions from Snowflake. And what we've since done is we've refactored those components there. So by default, these are now set to yes, just so you're aware that there are in a different kind of hash compatibility, but you want to check that these are set to yes there. The next thing you want to look at is we also have something called, I'm just going to type the word link in here. We also have the ability for you to accelerate link satellites or link effective satellites. So this is set to no at the moment, and we're going to leave it at no, but you can switch this on to yes later on if you want to do link satellites and things like that, right? So just bear in mind that there are additional settings in Data Vault here that you can use and set, and these are covered in more greater detail in our sort of Data Vault specific videos here that goes into detail of all of these settings and how they affect them. But for now, we're just going to leave the default settings and configurations. Another setting that we need to fix for the walkthrough is, if I just type the word infer in here, is the infer link hub. We need to set this to no. It is set to n, yes, so we need to set that to no and save that. That setting is partially implemented at the moment in the ELT pattern. It is fully implemented in our SSIS pattern and will be implemented, completely implemented in the next upcoming release. So for now, just set that to no and we're good to go. Let's look at data vault modeling and acceleration in BimlFlex. This is really where BimlFlex comes into its own. One of the key things you want to do when building a data vault is obviously you want to do your target model. You want to design your target model. Once you've designed your target model, you need to be able to take any source that you've imported and map the source to the target. Now what BimlFlex does is it runs some heuristics, and based on your metadata for the source, it'll forward engineer a data vault for you. So to give you an example of what that means, let's have a look at sales order header. So I'll just click on sales order header here, and I'm just going to go and refresh that, and I'm going to jump this back here, and I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit here. Actually, I'm going to go back first, and I'm going to go and say the first thing that I'm looking at sales order header here is it'll create a hub with 3 links over here. But let's just have a look at sales order header, the hub itself. Let's just say that in our target model, we've decided, and by the way, you can change this hub underscore, you can rename that to H underscore or whatever part of this you want. Okay, so there's naming templates that you can use. We're not going to cover it in this walkthrough. But let's just look at sales order header here. Let's just say in my target model, I don't have a sales order header. I actually decided I want to call this sales order. All we need to do here is go to the source table, edit table, and we have this model override name here. And think about that as your business name. You have that on columns and on objects, and you can give it a business name. So if my target hub was called sales order instead of sales order header, I'll rename it over here. I click save. Now I have the hub sales order, and you'll see everything else is done accordingly. The next thing you want to do in Data Vault is effectively go and analyze your links and decide whether they are a single unit of work or a natural business relationship, and decide on whether they should be combined or separated. Now we've gone ahead and worked with and see what the easiest option is for a data modeler to do this. And if you want to combine these 2 links into a single unit of work, you just grab it, drop it on top of that, and rename it, giving it a new unit of work name there, and boom, there we go. So now we've just combined our links, and if I wanted to bring the 3rd one in, it retains the name, bring it in. So now that's how easy it was to bring the sales order and create a single unit of work. If we, however, realize that this build to address actually is not part of the unit of work, it's a separate link, again, we can just split that out into its own separate satellite there, our link there, and it's split out there. I'm going to leave that though combined, so we leave that there. So what you want to have when you're done with your sales order header model is it needs to look like this. Now, again, BimlFlex was designed for us to incrementally build up our data vault, and we can bring that in little bits and pieces. So you can review this, you can print this out, but I'm going to go ahead and now look at my sales order detail. And again, I'm going to go through the same exercise here where actually I'm not going to call it sales order detail because we're bringing multiple systems in. And when we did our target model, we decided that we're going to call sales order detail sales order line. I'll rename that first. So as you can see here, I've now got my hub sales order line, my link here, and I've got two links here. And again, I want to probably go and say, well, you know what, this is one link, so I'm going to go and drag this on the top of that one, and I'm just going to call this sales order line. Okay, so when I'm done with my sales order line, this is what I want it to look like, right? So you just do that. We know there's other things we can do, but for now I'm just going to leave it at that. So that's how we've just covered off combining links into unit of works. All right, another thing that we want to do when we do data vault is we want to analyze our source systems here and possibly have and for here I'm going to go and switch on my show columns here because I'm going to do a little bit more modeling on my source columns here, and I'll zoom in here so we can see what we're doing here. So this is just my customer hub satellite, and what I want to do here is I'm analyzing this, and I'm going, right, these two columns here, passwords, hash and sat, I've determined that those are fast changing attributes, and I want to split them out into their own satellite. So I'm just going to go and select both of them by pressing Control and selecting them, and there's a split, and I'm going to call this satellite password. Okay, and great, and there it is. I'm going to just drag that out there. You can hit the refresh button at the top here, but I'm just going to drag it out. So now I have split my satellite into two, and then I may look at this row grid over here and saying, well, this let's just say this column here, actually I don't want this, so I want to exclude this column in my data vault. So I go and exclude that column there. So now it's no longer in my data vault. It'll still be extracted from source to staging, but it won't be in my data vault. And that's how very easy it is to actually exclude columns that you don't want to model yet or leave them out, and where you want to go ahead and do some sort of satellite splitting there. Okay, another thing that we want to do is quite possibly when you are integrating many different systems, you will quite often have a situation where you'll have some attributes that are common across all your system or should be common. So if I'm looking at my customer table here, I'm going to go and say, well, I've got my, let's just say my company name, salesperson, email address, phone, and modified date, because these are very specific for this system, and maybe even name style, right? That over there is going to need to be in a separate satellite here. I'm going to just call this details. And what will happen here is I'll split that into a third satellite for me, right? And I'm just going to grab this over here and this one there, so I can see this. And this satellite over here is going to be common. In other words, this is going to be, and I may even want to put this satellite, this name in here into what's called a bag of keys. So I can go and say, well, this is a bag of keys. There's a concept of bag of keys satellite there, so I'll have that over there. So effectively, a bag of keys is where all the source keys are going to be in. So the last one I want to do over here is look at this and go and say, well, I've got title, first name, middle name, last name, and suffix, and these are going to be across all of my systems. In other words, what I have here is I have satellites that are very specific to the source that it comes in from, because this metadata here, or this data here, is going to be, it may only exist in this one source, and you can decide you can exclude this entire satellite if you want. But this satellite over here is common. It's going to be across all my sources. So instead of having this based on a record source, I want this to be integrated from all my sources. So I can go and say remove the record source. So now I have just the customer satellite here. And if I zoom in here, you'll see, go out here, you'll see that I now have a customer satellite. I have a password satellite here, and I'll zoom in a second. I have a bag of keys satellite, and I have a detail satellite there. Okay, so that's how easy it is to do data vault splitting satellites in BimlFlex, is just to split that out. All right, so those are basically the only things that we're going to touch on in this walkthrough here. We will cover off in our training, all the other data vault aspects are covered of multi-active keys, transaction links, and everything else that you want to save as links, hierarchy links, is all covered off in separate sections of our training. But for the walkthrough, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to split out the customer satellite for now, and we're good to go. Now, one of the things to note about BimlFlex is that it is built to be incremental. So if I were to hit, so what I've done now is I've done some source modeling, and I've looked at the source, and I've now mapped it to my target model or my target state. But this is all logical modeling. Think about this as a logical modeling. Behind the scenes, BimlFlex has tracked every single, has put in place, heuristics to know that which column goes to which satellite and which keys are used to make up all of these keys. So all of that information is all tracked within our sort of metadata system. But it's all logical at the moment. There is no physical tables here. So if I go back to my objects here, you'll see that there's no data vault tables here just yet, because all I'm doing now is in a preview state or a logical modeling state. If I'm happy with my model, and again, I can go in here and combine, bring as much or as little of this in as I want. If I hit the publish button, it will only publish this logical model into a physical state, right? So that's where you can actually go and, incrementally add your data vault. So you may have 100 source tables that you want to model, but in scope, you may only have 3 or 4 core business concepts. Well, you can model those 3 or 4 core business concepts, publish those, and get all the ETL for it. But for the walkthrough, we're going to just go and select all. Again, it's going to bring back this entire data vault model here. It's actually going to look a little bit better if I take the columns off here and just do the refresh again. So what you'll see here is I'll have this entire data vault model now that I can print out, review with my team, and do a whole bunch of work on. So this effectively is what I want to go and publish for the walkthrough. So all I need to do here is hit the publish button, and what it does here is you can also obviously have multiple data vault projects to split it up into small swim lanes. But for now, we're just going to keep the defaults here, hit the publish button, and you'll get a publish successful button. And if I now head over to the objects, you'll see that I now have all of my objects here, my hubs, my links, my satellites, all created for me as physical objects, which I can go and have a look at. And I can go in here and look at my customer key. I can go into this link over here. I can look at that address SK there. I can see, okay, well, it's referencing the hub there. So all of that logic is there. I can always go back into the schema diagram here and either get a schema diagram of my my source system, or I can look at source system schema diagrams and do some schema modeling here, or I can look at my data vault model, just look at the hubs and links and refresh that, and then actually get like what is called as a data vault backbone. You can just look at your hubs and your links together. You can add whatever you want here, and then print this out and review that. All right, now that we've done the data vault modeling, let's go ahead and build it out so we can actually look at the output of it. So again, I'm going to go back into BimlStudio, my trial project that is pointing to the same location as where my BimlFlex project is, the trial project. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the refresh metadata button, which looks at the database and pulls in all of that metadata from my that we've just been modeling here. And as you can see here now, what I've got coming in here is I've got my hubs, my links, and my satellites coming in here, and it should look like this, bag of keys, details, password, and then the rest of it there. So this is a very simple data vault model. We're not going to go into details here. What we will have here is we'll have a batch file here that's going to load my data vault. Remember, we're doing ELT based data vault in this exercise here. If we were to change it to an SSIS base here, we would have all the data vault SSIS packages. But effectively, this batch file is just an orchestration batch that will call all of the data vault stored procedures in the right order, in the right sequence, and those stored procedures will do all the work. So what I'm going to do here is, this is the manual step. We will go into, as not in the walkthrough, but the continuous integration stuff is all documented. I'm just going to go ahead here and then say to create table script, which is going to give me a script that does all the tables. I'll copy that out, and I'm going to drop that into Management Studio for us. Let me just bring this across here into Management Studio and just run it again. There's a drop and create table script, so be aware of that. But for the walkthrough, let's just go ahead and click the run button here. Great. So now we have all of our tables created, and we also need a couple more things for Data Vault. The next couple of things we need for Data Vault is also we have Data Vault procedure script by source. These are the stored procedures that we need to load the Data Vault. So if I click that, I get all of the stored procedure and all the code that I need to load my Data Vault. I'll jump over into Management Studio here. And this does look like a couple of manual clicks here, but don't worry about it. As I said, we will take care of this in the continuous integration. So none of this, all of these copying of scripts is all catered for in our continuous integration and deployment part of things. Head back over to BimlStudio. Lastly, I'm going to go and grab the default insert script. So these default insert scripts here effectively creates an empty record or a first record inside of your hubs, your links, your satellites. This is when we have, especially for our business Data Vault, when we're creating point-in-time tables and bridge tables to eliminate any left joins, we put in a ghost record or a dummy record. So again, let's just drop that in there. Again, this whole process here is a lot better documented as a separate subject there. But again, I'll just drop this inside of Visual Studio here, Management Studio here, and let's build that out. And last but not least, we're not going to do this right now, but I'll just show it to you here. When we do get into our business Data Vault stuff, there is another one down the bottom here called Business Vault Stored Procedures. So that's all we needed to do there, and now we can go and just hit the build button here. So this is going to build the output. It's going to build all the size packages again, and it's going to build the package that will call all the stored procedures. All right, the build is completed, and what we'll do now is we'll go into Visual Studio and just open those files up there, open the solution up, and we can go and build it out. Okay, so when you've built it out, in your trial project, wherever you've put that location, so this is where mine is, there'll be an output folder, and inside of the output folder there's a whole bunch of files here, but the ones that we're looking for is the source one and then the Data Vault one. So the source one here will load sources staging, but the Data Vault one is what we're looking for at the moment. And the Data Vault one, as I said, we've got ELT based stored procedures. If we open that up, all right, so once you've opened up the Visual Studio project, you'll see one single batch here for the Data Vault. And you open that up and you'll see all of the packages here, and all of these are just basically SQL Server statements that calls the stored procedures. You can see here that I've got 2 in a row, and the reason for that is on the batches I've only defined 2 threads in the batches. Let me just show you where that is. So if I'm going to the batches here, for this Data Vault project, I've made this 2. If I make this 4, it'll be 4 in a row, 6 in a row. As you can see, that's how you can control the threading of the Data Vault process. So that concludes the Data Vault modeling side of things. We've only done a very lightweight model here. The more complex matter subjects are covered in our more advanced Data Vault training material. All right, let's have a look at how we can parameterize our source queries, and by adding high watermark parameterization to our queries. So I'm just going to head over to projects here on my source project, and I'm just going to add a parameter to sales order header. I'll do the rest, but I'll show you how to do one right now. Click on sales order header here, go into it, and you'll see the parameters tab. We'll click that. We'll say add a parameter to this object. We'll add a parameter. What column do we want to parameterize? Well, I want to parameterize the modified date. And what is the name I want to call the parameter? Now, this is the name that SSIS will use internally. And I'm just going to go last load date. In other words, what is the last load date? The operator here, I'm going to have greater than, because every time I load, I want to load greater than that, the previous loaded value. The default, what is the first time that I run my package? What is the parameter that I want to have all the data greater than that? No, so if you've got data that you want to start at a certain point, the first time you load, you can do this. The data type here for dates, funny enough, is string. The reason for that is because SSIS doesn't handle dates very well when it comes to parameters, so we've decided to use strings. The parameter SQL here, this is the SQL statement that we need to run at the end of the package to actually get the next load date. So I've prepared one here already, which is basically going to go and say, get me the max at this. Wherever we use at this, it will replace that with the name that the column name. So this will be replaced with modified date. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, get me the max modified date, and then convert it to a date time. So as you can see, that's the parameter that I have, and I will go and say save. So now I've parameterized this. So I'll go ahead here and do that for all the others, and I'll just show you what that looks like. Actually, what I've decided to do is show you how you can use the combination of the BimlFlex Excel app and the BimlFlex app and the Excel add-in that we've got. So the Excel add-in is great for doing things like bulk editing. So if you have bulk editing operations, you want to use the Excel add-in. So in BimlStudio, you'll see here on the BimlFlex tab, you'll see the BimlFlex Metadata Editor. So I'm going to click that, and this will open up Excel. Right. So the Excel add-in here, you have a BimlFlex ribbon tab here. We click on the metadata connection. So we click on the metadata connection here, which will bring the document actions up. You'll need to set this up. By default, these are the default settings, but what you'll need to do is you'll need to set up your server again, Windows or SQL authentication, what is the database, and the customer version. So I'm just going to hit update here. And if you only have one customer version, it'll default to that. Obviously, we've got the BimlFlex trial version 1. And then the next thing we need to do is do a get all entities. So this goes and retrieves all of our metadata from our database and brings that into Excel. So then we now have that available for bulk editing in Excel. So I'm going to close that up. And as you can see here, I'll have my parameters. And this is where Excel actually is great. Because, if I wanted to go and add the parameters for all the other tables, what I would need to do here is, go in the app and click through all of the options. But in Excel, I'm just going to go and copy this down. And, I'll copy, a couple down here. And the only thing I have to do, because we've got this at this, it's actually awesome. So all I need to do here is I'll start at the top. I'll just go address, grab the next one. You get the picture, right? So get the next one. Get customer address is the next one. Product category, product description. They all have modified date and product model and product model description. And lastly, grab one more, and I'll go and grab sales order detail. Then what you do is you hit the set current sheet, and this pushes that metadata back up to the database. Again, let me go into BimlFlex app now just to show you that how these things work. If I go into sales order detail here, got the columns, parameters, I'll need to maybe hit the refresh button here to get all of that metadata back, get the sales order detail, parameters, and there you'll see the parameter. So one of the things that you need to appreciate is that if the application is aware of all the changes it's making, if I'm go ahead and use the Excel app and make changes in the Excel app, I may have to go back in here and hit this refresh button, which actually refreshes the metadata from the database. So just be aware of that. Now that we've done the Data Vault Accelerator and built our Data Vault out, as you can see here, we have all of our links and all of our point-in-time bridge tables here and all of our satellite tables here. We want to go ahead and start building some point-in-time tables and bridge tables to help us with the performance constructs to build out our data mart. So let me show you how easy it is to do that in BimlFlex. So again, I'll head over to the projects and I'll head over to my Data Vault projects, and effectively all of these actions are done on the hubs. So I'll start with a very basic one, a simple one. The first one, actually, the first one here is the customer. It's probably going to be the more complex one. And I'll do a point-in-time table here. And when you do a point-in-time table, you have the option here to choose the satellites that you want. So in this case here, I'm going to leave this one out, and I'm going to grab those three. So I'm going to create a point-in-time table across 3 satellites and not all the satellites here. Actual fact is I'm going to leave out the passwords. Okay, so let's just say I want only those 2 there. you can give the point in time table a name. It defaults to the same name as the hub, but replacing the hub underscore with a pit underscore. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. So that is now going to create the metadata structures for me to create a point in time table. What it's done, it's gone ahead and created a custom attributes. We handle that through custom attributes here, but you don't have to worry about it. You can just interact with it over here. So I'll go back to columns. So I'm going to do the same on the hub address. I'm just going to create point in time table, select the satellite. If you don't select the satellite, the default is it'll take the hub and all the satellites attached to the hub. You have to be careful there though, because if you add more and more satellites to the hub, it'll just start bringing those in also. So I'm going to go OK. The customer address I'm going to leave alone. Not going to worry about that for now. Actually, yeah, let's just do that. I'm just going to add it in on all of these, just to show you that we may or may not use them. All right, so I've gone ahead and created a point in time table across all of these, just to be, to speed things up. I have a point in time table on every single one of these. If you look at that, with all of their satellites, the only one that's different is the customer. I've only got the 2 satellites on there, but the rest of it only has 1 satellite. So we've got all the point in time tables that we want, and now it's time to go and have a look at breach tables here. So I'm going to start at the bottom here. Now, when you create breach tables, it's very important to understand the context of grain. So, the breach table is at the grain of the table. So if you have a sales order line, if we create a breach table on sales order here, we really do not want to include the sales order line stuff here. So we want to grab this guy here, this link over here, the sales order, and its hubs, because we're going to create another breach between sales order line going back to sales order. So do not include the sales order line, because that'll change the grain of the sales order. So I'm going to call breach sales order here, and then I'm going to go ahead and create the sales order line and create a breach there again. Okay, so we will use these 2 breaches to connect to each other. At the moment, BimlFlex only supports a primary hub and its links connected to it, and then going to those hubs there. And then I'm going to create one more breach here on the product, and in here I'm actually going to go and grab those 2 again because of the grain here. Now, easy way to, if you're doing BimlFlex, easy way to know is normally the hub. If you've created it, if you're not renamed the links or create unit of works, it's normally the first part of the link gives you an idea of the grain. So you can see here I'm shifting across, so I'm not going to include that into this. So I'm just going to create a breach over those. So what we've done there is we've created point in time tables across all of our hubs, and we've added breach tables of the sales order line, and product. So now that we've added all those point in time tables, it's time to go and build them out. So let me go over here again to BimlStudio, open my project up, and hit the refresh metadata. And as the metadata comes in, as you'll see here, you'll see these breaches coming in. So I've got those 3 breach tables as I've discussed, and I have all my point in time tables, noting that on the customer, I'll only have these 2 customers here, right? So now that I have that, I can go ahead and build this out again. So again, I'm going to do this manually. First thing here is I'm going to do the create table script again to get all the tables. So effectively follow the same process here of creating the tables first and then doing the scripts. So as you know already, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and then do all the scripts. So I'm not going to go and record this again. So what we're going to do, as I said, is I'm not going to show you all of this, but we're going to go grab the default insert script, the stored procedure script there. But lastly, what we're really interested in at the moment is this business vaults procedure script here. And this script will have all of the data of all of the code needed to create those point in time and breach tables, or actually not the code that actually is going to execute that. So again, we go ahead here and we run that in. And what you'll see in your project here is, if we just go and have a look at the BFX RTV database here, we'll see all of the tables there that we can now use to start modeling our data mart. And in the stored procedures here, we will have all of the code, the stored procedures that's going to be used to load both our data vault and then our breach tables and then our point in time tables. Now that we've created the data vault and the business data vault constructs, we're going to go ahead and actually look at the data mart process. So the first thing you need to do to build the data mart is you need to create the views that you need to load the data mart, and all of those views, the code for the views, are attached in the documentation. But let's have a quick look at just how would you build a view for a fact in a dimension table. So let's look at the fact table. It's probably the more complex one of the lot. The first thing you need to do is, again, you decide with where you're going to start. So in this case, I'm going to start with the point in time table. So you always start in your form clause with your primary point in time table. Now I could have used the sales order line here first, but I'm going to start with the sales order. You join the point in time table to the bridge table on the sort of surrogate key, and then you would join the point in time table to its satellite. Okay, then you would join the rest of the point in time tables to the bridge, and so forth and so down. So here I'm joining the customer, the address, and the address again for the ship to address and build to address. And the reason we're joining these point in time tables is because we need to get the business keys back for those. So we need these business keys back from the point in time tables to be able to hook them up to the dimensions. But that is just a pattern here. Feel free to look at it. We cover this off in our more advanced training sessions here. So what I've done here is I've created the views for the sales order, the customer, the address, and the product here. So once we've created all these views, we run them into our data vault, and we'll have the views sitting over here in our data vault. We will have all of the views. So if I refresh this, I've run them in here, and now what I need to do is actually get that metadata into BimlFlex. And to do that, I'll head over to the BimlFlex app, and I'll go to the projects, and I'll select the data mart project here because I'm going to load data from the data vault into the data mart. Going to hit the import metadata button, and I have split this up into two separate schemas here. So I actually want everything. I want all of these views from my DBO schema, and I'm going to unselect these two columns here. They're not really relevant, but we're going to unselect those. And if you've created your views where the first column in the view is also the key of the view, remember when we import views, we do not have access to all the primary keys because views just obviously don't have primary keys and foreign keys and references. But if we have that, what we can do is if you've put your key in the first column, you can select this first column button here and hit import metadata. This is now going to bring all of the view metadata into BimlFlex. So let's have a look at what they look like. So again, if we go to the data mart project here, we'll see now that we have these views, and if I look at the views like the customer view here, you'll see that on the first column I've got the primary key, integration key, and the rest of the columns will all be there. Again, if we look at things like, sorry, I'll go back to the project here, look at that, and then if you look at the sales order, the one thing you probably want to know or do is you want to give these column names the right names for your dimensions on your facts. So spend a little bit of time working in your views and your facts here to make sure that the columns that's returned as metadata into BimlFlex is actually what you want it to be. So now let's go ahead here and actually look at building out some facts and dimensions. So we're going to normally start off, it's probably best to start off with a dimension. So the first one I'm going to do is start off with the very top one here, the address. Hit the clone button here, and then type in this target schema here of dim. So I'm going to put my dimensions in a schema called dim. I'm going to take it out of there, change the target object type here to dimension, and then I want to add an identity column here of address key. So target schema, address, dimension, and then just hit save. So I'll go back to the projects, and what you'll need to do here is go there, and if you may need to go ahead here and just reload, hit reload and get your dimension back in here. So now I've put my dim address there. Okay, the next thing you also see here is if I go back to address, you'll see if I just go to any one of these columns, you'll see that it's got the target table and target column. So that the clone button there, what it does is it takes the metadata of the object that you are cloning, creates a target object, and creates mappings between the source and the target. So what we now effectively, just by clicking that clone button, we have now created the lineage to load that view and put it into the dimension. So let me go ahead and just very quickly do the rest of them. I'm going to go ahead here and go to customer, and I'm going to clone the same. I'm going to go through the same process here of just going dim, taking that out, changing this to dimension, and identity column and leave that as it is, hit save, and then again the same with project, clone, go ahead and do dim, go project here, and dimension, add identity, product, and good. Now that I've created my 3 dimensions, I want to also create my fact table. Again, we're going to do a little bit more things here. So I'm going to go ahead on the fact table and hit clone. And I'm going to put this in the fact schema and take this away and go fact. And I'm not going to add an identity column. You can if you want, but identity columns on fact tables doesn't really mean a lot, but so you can add one if you want, add one. I'm not going to do one in the walkthrough. Hit save, and what this is going to do is create the fact table for me. So what I'm going to do now is actually go and hit the refresh metadata button to, if I go to project here, I will now have my dimensions and facts here, and I'll have my tables here, and the lineage will be already inputted for me. The next thing that I want to do is obviously create the relationships between the fact, the product, and the address. So there has to be a relationship where I need to create the star schema. So the easiest way to do that is to go ahead here and go into my star schema here, and I'm going to go and grab my data mart, and I'm going to grab all of them over here. I'm going to grab all of them over here, and I'm actually going to go and show my columns because I'm going to do some modeling here. I'll hit the refresh button here, and just for the sake of actually making it look like a star schema, I'll move things around a little bit here. So now what we need to do is we need to connect the fact up to the customer address twice actually, and the product here. Now as you can see here in the fact sales order, I have the customer BK. So this customer business key, or the key from the customer, needs to be connected to the dimension here. And then so what we're going to do is I'm going to go and add a reference here. Now if I add a reference between the fact sales order and the customer, it comes up with a dialog, and what this dialog is telling you is that the customer business key is going to be mapped to the customer key, and then it's going to rename the source column to customer key. So effectively what it needs to do is it needs to change the data type of this to the customer key, because we want the surrogate key in the fact, but behind the scenes BimlFlex have retained the metadata and the knowledge to know that actually I'm getting a business key that needs to look up a surrogate key and return the surrogate key to the fact. So I'll do exactly the same here for the product BK, add a reference between this and that, and it's going to say the same thing. Then the bill to address, reference between this and address, say okay. And as you see here, as I've added this reference here, it calls this one address key here. I actually want to go and edit this column and rename this to my bill to address key, and we will add make it a little bit more intuitive later on, but for now let's rename that to bill to address key. And then I'll do this, add another reference here where I'll drop that in there, say okay, it's going to rename this to address key, and again I'll just edit this column here and call this ship to address key. Okay, fantastic. So that is all we needed to do to build a very basic data vault, a data mart from our data vault. However, we want to maybe go and do a couple more things here. So I'm going to go ahead over, let's just say these are all now built based on type 1 dimensions, but let's just have a look at our customer dimension and make some of these attributes type 2. So let's head back over here, and I can do it from here, straight from here. So I can go in here, and actually what I'll do here is, let's just say my first name, middle name, last name, and suffix, and let's just say name style. Those are all type 1, you know. I don't want to track history on it. But let's just say my company name, salesperson, email address, and phone. Those could change. So what I will do here is go to the bulk edit option here and say I want to change all of those type 1s to type 2. So now what I have is I have a table here. Let me head over here and just show you the result of that. If I look at my customer dim, I have a table now here that will have, oh, I need to refresh my metadata. Okay, so what I'll now have is I'll have a table here that will have type 1 attributes and type 2 attributes, and this is some referred to as a type 6 attribute. I could have made all of these type 2 attributes, which will be a pure type 2 dimension, And if all of these attributes are type 1, it'll be a type 1 dimension. And that is how you would bring in views from a staging layer or from a data vault and bring that into BimlFlex and create your data mart layer. So now that we've created our data mart layer, or the metadata file data mart layer, let's head back over again to BimlStudio here and go and refresh our metadata. So again, I'm going to do a couple of steps here. It's going to be manual, but as I said, with continuous integration and deployment, everything that I'm going to do here and right now through manual steps is going to can be automated. So with the data mart, we will have the dimensions and facts sitting over here. We'll also have the same staging tables here. Leave this as default, but there is options in BimlFlex to put this into their own separate database or change the naming convention and naming pattern here. But for now, let's leave it as it is. And what we'll also see down the bottom here is we'll have the point in time table, bridge table batches that we've created. And now we will have a data mart batch, and we will also have the SSIS packages for the data mart loads. Again, you can go and add extension points in these, but for the walkthrough, that's all it is. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go and, again, just for the walkthrough, I'm just going to go ahead and actually go and grab the table create script again, just to get the tables. Grab that and push that into Management Studio here. And this is just for me to test my build. Okay, and I'm going to head back into BimlStudio and hit the build button, which means I'm now going to build everything that I need end to end for my source to staging. I've got my data vault projects there. I've got my point in time tables. I've got my bridge tables, and now I'll have my dimensions and my facts will be built out for me now too. All right, so I've built it and I've got an error. Now this could, when you're working with BimlFlex, you will still get build errors, right? So what I've realized here is that in our sample metadata, we've not set one of the settings there. So let's go over and fix this. So this is saying to me that this row, flex row is inferred, is not in there, and this is one of our configuration settings. So let me go and show you just a little bit about those configuration settings here. So I'll head back into BimlFlex, go to configurations. And how configurations work is effectively we have a set of standard configurations that we need to use the BimlFlex, and these are the keys. However, and it has a configuration value here. These names you can change. So the defaults here is just so they are unique. But what it is complaining about is this row is inferred, and you can actually use them and set them up. So what we should have done here is set this one here is up to derived and save this. And now go ahead and build it. So I'll go back into BimlFlex here and just go and create the objects again. So I'll go back into BimlStudio, sorry. So I'll go back into BimlStudio here, refresh the metadata, and it's pulling the metadata back in. And then what I will do is I'll go to generate scripts, create table scripts here. So just to get the latest with that row is inferred in, copy that and go and paste that into Management Studio again, go through the same process and run that. So I actually wanted to show you that error, and now what I'll do is I'll head back into BimlStudio again, and I'll go and build it, and hopefully this time we won't get any errors. All right, so the build is now completed, and hopefully that's for you too. And then what we'll now do is we'll head back over to Visual Studio, and I'll just go ignore all here, and I'll go no to all there. And what we'll now do is I'll open up and just make sure that we have the data mart project. Again, I'll choose the data mart project here, open that up, say no there, and this will load the data mart project. Okay, so now that we have this data mart project here, it's got a batch and all the packages. I'm just going to briefly show you, feel free to look through around there, but I'll show you just briefly a couple of things. I'll open up the customer one here, and because remember we've defined this to be a type 6 or type 1 and type 2. If I go into this package here, you'll see down the bottom here, it actually has quite a lot of complex, stuff here to handle type 1 changes, type 2 changes, inserts, and also obviously unaffected rows, and do all the row counting. If I look at just the address dimension, which is just a type 1 dimension, you'll see that it's a lot simpler pattern here and only has the type 1 dimension here, and will allow you the ability to inject any customizations logic that you need. So that really just gets us to the end of the walkthrough. You've now been able to build all the way from source to staging with persistent staging. You've got your data vault layer, you've got your business data vault layer there, and you have your data mart layer.